My parents spent my entire life treating me like an embarrassing afterthought while building a shrine to my sister, Laura. But when they tried to use my failure as a punchline at my father's retirement party, they didn't realize the unemployed daughter they were mocking had just acquired their biggest client. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The betrayal didn't happen in a boardroom or during a shouting match. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon, while I was lying in the dark with a migraine that felt like a railroad spike was being slowly driven through my left temple. I was physically shattered. The last 3 months had been a blur of 18-hour days, sleeping under my desk, and eating vending machine crackers while my team and I finalized the code for Sentinel's 2 rollout. We were days away from the public announcement that would change the cybersecurity landscape forever. But right then, I was just a woman in sweatpants trying not to vomit from exhaustion. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. The screen illuminated the dark room, piercing my eyes. It was my mother, Paige. I hesitated. Calls from Paige were rarely inquiries about my well-being. They were usually logistical commands or updates on the wonderful, sparkly life of my younger sister, Laura. But, being the daughter who still desperately craved a scrap of affection, I answered. "Hello," my voice cracked, dry and weak. "Jane, finally," Paige's voice was sharp, cutting through the fog in my head. There was no hello, no how are you, just immediate irritation. "I've been trying to reach you for an hour. We need to finalize the seating chart for your father's retirement gala this weekend." I rubbed my temple, closing my eyes. "Mom, I'm really not feeling well. I think I have the flu or something. Can we do this later?" "Don't be dramatic, Jane," she sighed, the sound of a heavy bracelet clinking against a table audible in the background. "It's always something with you. Sensitivity is a luxury, and frankly, we don't have time for it. Look, we had to make some adjustments. Since the guest list has expanded, Edward's partners are bringing the senior stakeholders we need to move you." I sat up slowly, the room spinning. Move me to where?" "To the overflow table," she said, as casually as if she were commenting on the weather. "Table 19. It's near the kitchen entrance. It's actually better for you, really. You won't have to worry about making conversation with the investors. You know how awkward you get when people ask about, well, whatever it is you're doing these days." My stomach turned. Table 19, the kids' table, the vendor table. "Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "I'm 29 years old. You're sitting me next to the kitchen." "It's not about age, Jane, it's about status," she snapped, her patience evaporating. "This night is about Edward's legacy. It's about success. Laura is sitting at the head table with us because she represents the future of this family. She just got that promotion to senior marketing associate, and she's bringing her fiancé, the doctor. It looks cohesive. You sitting there alone in your off-the-rack dress, explaining that you're freelancing or whatever euphemism you're using for unemployment. It distracts." I felt a coldness spread through my chest that had nothing to do with my fever. I never said I was unemployed. I said I was building something. Yes, your computer projects." She dismissed it entirely. "Look, there's one more thing. Since you're at table 19, could you keep an eye on the gift table? Just make sure the envelopes make it into the box. We don't want to hire security for inside the venue." Silence hung heavy on the line. They didn't just want to hide me, they wanted to use me as unpaid labor. "Actually," Paige continued, her tone softening into that fake, sickly sweet register she used when she knew she was crossing a line but didn't care. "Speaking of envelopes, your father and I decided to liquidate that small savings bond Grandma left for you. You know, the one for a rainy day." My heart hammered against my ribs. That bond wasn't huge, maybe $5,000, but Grandma had given it to me specifically because she knew my parents favored Laura. She had whispered to me, "For when you need to get away." "You did what?" I whispered. "You can't cash that, it's in my name." "Well, we had power of attorney from when you were in college, and we never really revoked it, did we?" She breezed past the legality. We needed the cash flow to put the deposit down on a new Tesla for Laura. It's her reward for the promotion. We figured you wouldn't mind, seeing as you don't really have any expenses living in that tiny apartment. You're always saying you don't need much. The room went silent. The migraine vanished, replaced by a clarity so sharp it felt like a blade. They stole from me. They stole my grandmother's safety net to buy my sister a luxury car she didn't need. Jane, are you there? I'm here, I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. It was hollow, devoid of the usual pleading tone I took with her. Good, so table 19. Saturday, 6:00 p.m. sharp. Don't be late and please buy a new dress. Something that doesn't look like you found it at a thrift store. She hung up. I sat there in the dark, phone in hand, listening to the silence of my tiny apartment, which was actually the penthouse of the building I owned. The betrayal wasn't just the money. It was the absolute erasure of my existence as a human being worthy of respect. It was worse than the diagnosis itself. The next 3 days were a test of willpower I wasn't sure I could pass. My instinct was to scream, to drive over to their sprawling suburban estate and demand my money back, to shake them until they actually saw me. But I didn't. I went into the office. I walked into Sentinel's headquarters, a sleek, converted industrial warehouse in the city center, and felt the hum of activity that usually grounded me. But today, I felt like a ghost in my own company. Jane, you okay? I looked up to see David, my COO, and one of the few people who knew the truth about my family dynamics. He was holding a tablet, looking concerned. I'm fine, I lied, pouring a black coffee with a shaking hand. Just family stuff. The retirement party. Yeah, apparently I'm security detail for the gift table, I said, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. And they cashed Grandma's bond to buy Laura a Tesla. David's eyes widened. You're kidding. Jane, you have to tell them. You're about to be on the cover of Wired. You just closed a $20 million Series B round. Why are you letting them treat you like a vagrant? I looked out the glass walls of my office at the team of 50 engineers and developers working on software that protected major banks and hospitals. Because, David, if I tell them, they won't love me. They'll just love the money. They'll love the status. I wanted them to appreciate me, the daughter who works hard, not the CEO with the checkbook. They don't deserve either version of you, David said gently. I know, I whispered, but I'm going to that party. I needed to see them. I needed to look Edward and Paige in the eye one last time before the news broke. I needed to give them one final chance to be decent human beings before the world told them who I really was. On Thursday, I drove out to their house. I told myself it was to drop off a chaotic collection of old photos Paige had asked for, fodder for a slideshow about Edward's great life. But really, I was testing the waters. When I pulled into the driveway, Laura's car was there. Not the new Tesla yet, but her current BMW, which Edward paid the lease on. I walked into the house, a box of photos in my arms, and the smell of expensive potpourri hit me like a wall. Oh, look who finally dragged herself out of bed. Laura's voice drifted from the living room. I walked in. Laura was sprawled on the white linen sofa, flipping through a bridal magazine, while Paige was arranging flowers in a crystal vase. Edward was sitting in his leather armchair, swirling a glass of scotch. Hi, I said, setting the box down. Here are the pictures. You look tired, Jane, Edward said, not looking up from his glass. Dark circles. You really should take better care of yourself. It's hard to find a husband when you look exhausted. I've been working, Dad, I said, keeping my tone neutral. Doing what? Laura chimed in, smirking. Fixing people's Wi-Fi. Edward chuckled. Now, Laura, be nice. Honest work is honest work, even if it's small scale. I just don't want her to embarrass us on Saturday, Laura said, looking me up and down with genuine disdain. I invited the Turners, and their son is single. If Jane shows up looking like a drowned rat and talking about her startup ideas, he's going to run for the hills. I'm not looking for a husband, Laura, I said, feeling that familiar constriction in my throat. And my company is doing fine. Company, Paige scoffed, jamming a hydrangea into the vase with unnecessary force. Jane, honey, you sell troubleshooting services online. Let's call a spade a spade. It's a gig. It's not a career. Look at your sister. She's managing campaigns for major regional brands. That is a career. I looked at Laura. She was 26, 3 years younger than me. She had never paid a bill in her life. Her job was obtained because Edward played golf with the agency owner. Her condo was bought by Paige. Her car was leased by Edward. She was a hollow shell painted gold. I'm happy for you, Laura, I said, the lie tasting like ash. You should be, Laura replied, flippin'. Gia Paige. Mom said you were upset about the bond. Honestly, Jane, don't be so selfish. I needed a reliable car for work. You barely leave your apartment. What were you going to spend it on? Cat food. The cruelty was so casual, so practiced. They fed off it. It bonded them. I was the common enemy, the loser they could all feel superior to. I looked at my father, waiting for him to intervene, to say that stealing my money was wrong. He just took a sip of his scotch and stared at the fireplace. Just make sure you wear heels on Saturday, Edward grunted. You look short in flats. I nodded slowly. I picked up my purse. I realized then that there was no saving this. There was no conversation that would fix their perception of me. I'll wear heels, I said, turning to the door, and I'll bring a gift. Don't bother, Laura called out. We know you can't afford anything good. Just make sure the card doesn't have a glitter bomb in it. As I walked to my car, my modest 4-year-old sedan that I kept specifically to avoid questions, I felt a strange calm settle over me. They thought they were dealing with Jane the failure, Jane the backup plan, Jane the sensitive doormat. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. They had forgotten that for the last 5 years, while they were busy patting themselves on the back, I had been building the very technology that Edward's investment firm had just signed a massive contract to secure. They didn't know who they were really inviting to dinner. To understand why I stayed silent for so long, you have to understand the ecosystem of my family. I wasn't just the black sheep, I was the practice run. When I was born, Edward and Paige were young and struggling. They were stressed, impatient, and inexperienced. I was a colicky baby, a shy toddler, a sensitive child who cried when people raised their voices. To them, my tears were a sign of a defect. Too sensitive, my father would say, shaking his head when I came home crying because of a bully. She's too soft for this world. By the time Laura was born 3 years later, Edward's career had taken off. They had money, they had patience, and Laura was different. She was loud, demanding, and charismatic. She learned early that if she smiled and performed, she got rewards. If I cried, I got sent to my room. The dynamic calcified quickly. Laura was the golden child, the sun around which our family orbited. I was the scapegoat, the emotional dumping ground. When I got straight A's, it was expected. When Laura got a C, they hired private tutors at $100 an hour and blamed the teacher. When I wanted to go to a robotics camp, they said it was too expensive. 2 weeks later, they took Laura to Disneyland because she had a hard semester. I learned to stop asking. I learned to stop showing them my achievements. When I got a full scholarship to a state university for computer science, they shrugged and said, "Well, it's not Ivy League, but it's good that it's free so we can focus on Laura's tuition." Laura, of course, went to a private liberal arts college that cost $60,000 a year, where she majored in communications and spent 4 years partying. I worked 3 jobs in college. I worked in the library, I fixed laptops for cash, and I interned at a data center on the graveyard shift. I learned to survive on 4 hours of sleep. I learned that no one was coming to save me. And that brings us to Laura in the present day. If you saw Laura on the street, you'd think she was perfect. She was undeniably beautiful, blonde highlights maintained every 6 weeks, Pilates-toned body, designer clothes that fit just right. She had mastered the art of the influencer personality. She was bubbly and effusive with strangers, radiating a warmth that felt genuine until you tried to get close to it and realized it was just a ring light reflection. But beneath the polish was a rod of deep, gnawing insecurity. Laura couldn't handle anyone else shining. If a cousin got engaged, Laura would announce a promotion. If I got a new haircut, Laura would make a comment about how brave I was to try something so retro. She needed me to be beneath her. My failure was the foundation of her confidence. The Friday before the party, the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. I was at my office, reviewing the guest list for the retirement gala that my assistant had pulled, public record, technically, since it was a corporate event. I saw the name, Aunt Megan. My breath hitched. Aunt Megan was Edward's younger sister. She had been excommunicated from the family 10 years ago for calling Paige a narcissistic enabler at Thanksgiving dinner. I hadn't seen her since I was 19. I picked up my office phone. Get me the contact info for Megan Miller in Chicago, now. 20 minutes later, I was on the phone with her. Jane, her voice was gruff, smoky, but surprised. Is that really you? It's me, Aunt Megan. Well, I'll be damned. I thought you fell off the face of the earth, or that your mother finally locked you in the attic. Close, I laughed, and it felt good to laugh. I saw you're coming to the gala. I am, she said, her tone hardening. Your father sent me an invitation. I think he wants to show off. Wants me to see his kingdom before he rides off into the sunset. I was planning on skipping it, sending a dead plant or something. Don't skip it, I said, my voice dropping. I need you there. Why? So I can watch them parade Laura around like a show pony and treat you like the hired help. I don't think my blood pressure can take it, kid. No, I said, because I need someone to hold the newspaper. The what? I'm going to send you a file, Aunt Megan. It's an article. It comes out in the Business Journal on Monday, but I have the advanced digital proof. I need you to print it out. I need you to bring it. There was a pause on the line. I could hear her clicking her mouse as the email I just sent arrived. Open it, I said. I waited 10 seconds, 20. Then a sharp intake of breath. Holy, Jane, is this real? It's real. 20 million, she gasped. Sentinel, that's you. That's me. And Edward doesn't know, Paige, Laura. They think I fix Wi-Fi. A low, deep chuckle started in Aunt Megan's throat. It grew into a full-blown cackle of delight. Oh, this is rich. This is delicious. You want me to bring this? I want you to wait for the right moment. You'll know when. Honey, Aunt Megan said, I wouldn't miss this for the world. I'll see you at table 19. I hung up the phone. The pieces were set. The antagonist was confident, the allies were armed, and the stage was a ballroom filled with people who thought they knew everything. Laura, Paige, and Edward had spent a lifetime constructing a reality where they were the kings and queens and I was the peasant. They loved that reality. They protected it fiercely. But reality has a nasty habit of crashing down when you build it on lies, and I was about to bring the wrecking ball. Saturday arrived with a sky the color of a bruised plum, threatening rain that never quite fell. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in my penthouse bedroom, staring at a version of myself my parents had never seen. Paige had told me to buy a new dress. She had specified something that didn't look like a thrift store find. So I obliged. I was wearing a sheath dress made of midnight blue silk, tailored specifically for my measurements in Milan during a tech summit last autumn. To the untrained eye like my mother's, it was just a simple, dark dress. Modest, unassuming. But to anyone who knew quality, the drape of the fabric and the hand-stitching whispered of quiet, immense power. It was armor. I paired it with simple diamond studs, real ones, not the cubic zirconia Laura usually mocked, and pulled my hair back into a severe, elegant chignon. I wasn't dressing to compete with Laura's inevitable sequins. I was dressing for a funeral. The funeral of their delusions. Before I left, I opened my laptop one last time. I logged into the Sentinel Secure admin portal. The dashboard hummed with green status lights, representing the cybersecurity infrastructure of over 400 enterprise clients. I navigated to the Pending Contracts tab. There it was, right at the top. Miller and Associates Enterprise Security Overhaul. My father's firm. I clicked on the file details. Edward, or rather, his CTO, had signed the contract 3 days ago. They were terrified of a recent data breach in their sector and had come to Sentinel begging for our proprietary encryption. They had signed a 7-figure implementation deal. My signature was on the countersign line, but because I used my legal initials J.A. Miller on documents, and because Edward never bothered to look at the details of vendor paperwork. He had no idea he had just hired his failure of a daughter to save his legacy. I printed a copy of the signature page. I folded it neatly and placed it in my clutch right next to my phone. This was my leverage. This was the trap. I checked my phone. A text from Aunt Megan. I'm in the parking lot. I have the package. I'm wearing a hat big enough to smuggle a turkey. Let's do this. I took a deep breath, the air hissing through my teeth. I wasn't going there to ruin my father's night. I was going there to demand the truth, but if they chose to lie, well, I had the receipts. I drove to the country club in my sedan. I parked in the back, far away from the valet stand where Edward would undoubtedly be greeting guests, so he wouldn't have to be seen standing next to my dented bumper. As I walked toward the grand entrance, the sound of a string quartet drifted through the air. The venue was opulent, gold leaf trim, crystal chandeliers the size of small cars, and massive floral arrangements that probably cost more than my college tuition. It was a temple to Edwa. Ard's ego. I reached the check-in table. A young woman with a clipboard smiled at me. Name. Jane Miller, I said softly. Her finger scrolled down the list. She paused. She frowned. She flipped a page. Oh, she said, her voice dropping an octave. Right, yes, table 19. It's through the main doors, take a sharp left, and it's tucked behind the pillar near the service corridor. Thank you, I said, keeping my face impassive. I walked into the ballroom. The room was a sea of tuxedos and glittering gowns. At the center of it all, under the massive chandelier, stood my family. Edward looked regal in a custom tux, holding court with 3 other gray-haired men. Paige was shimmering in silver, laughing too loudly at a joke I was sure wasn't funny. And there was Laura. She was wearing a gold sequin gown that was technically stunning, but spiritually aggressive. It screamed, "Look at me." She was hanging onto the arm of her fiancé, Mark, a bewildered-looking orthopedic surgeon who always seemed like he was trying to calculate the exit velocity needed to escape the Miller family gravitational pull. I watched them for a moment. They looked like a perfect advertisement for the American dream. Successful father, supportive mother, beautiful daughter. I tightened my grip on my clutch. I was the glitch in their matrix. And tonight, the system was going to crash. I made my way to table 19. It was exactly as Paige had promised. It was a small, circular table shoved into a drafty corner next to the double doors that swung open every 30 seconds to reveal waiters carrying trays of dirty dishes. The air smelled faintly of industrial dishwasher detergent and shrimp cocktail. My table mates were a motley crew of people Edward clearly felt obligated to invite, but didn't want to actually see. There was Mr. Henderson's elderly secretary, who was asleep, a distant cousin from Ohio who was wearing a polo shirt, and 2 interns from the firm who looked terrified to be breathing the same air as the partners. Great view, I muttered to myself, sitting down. My back was to the room, facing the wall. I had to physically turn my chair around just to see the stage. A shadow fell over me. I looked up to see Paige. She didn't look happy. She looked like a bomb disposal technician approaching a live wire. You made it, she said, her eyes scanning my dress. She frowned, clearly disappointed that she couldn't criticize it. Well, it's a bit dark, but at least it fits. Hello, Mom, I said. Don't get comfortable, she hissed, leaning in. The photographers are doing the family portraits in 5 minutes near the fireplace. We need you to stand on the far left. And please, Jane, try to smile. You always have that dour, victim look on your face. I'll do my best, I said. By the way, did you bring the paperwork for the bond you cashed? I need it for my taxes. It was a lie, I didn't need it for taxes, but I wanted to see her react. Paige scoffed, waving a hand dismissively. Oh, honestly, Jane, not tonight, it's $5,000. Stop acting like we raided a trust fund. You should be grateful we put it to good use. Laura's safety is paramount. You know how dangerous the highway is these days. Right, I said, my voice flat. Safety. She marched off. I followed her to the fireplace. The photographer, a harried man with too many lenses around his neck, was trying to arrange the golden family. Okay, Mom and Dad in the center, he directed. Laura, sweetheart, right next to Dad, hand on his shoulder. Perfect. And, who is this? He pointed at me with his lens. That's the other one, Laura said, flashing a blinding veneers white smile. Just put her on the end, maybe crop her if it's too wide. She laughed, Paige laughed, Edward chuckled. I stood on the end, I didn't smile. I looked directly into the lens with a gaze that could strip paint. As the flash went off, a man approached the group. It was Mr. Henderson, the senior partner of the firm. He was a legend in the industry, a man Edward had spent 30 years trying to impress. Edward, Mr. Henderson boomed, shaking my father's hand. Magnificent party, truly. Thank you, sir, Edward beamed, practically bowing. It's been an honor serving the firm. And this must be the famous Laura, Henderson said, turning to my sister. Your father talks about you constantly, the marketing genius. Laura preened, dipping her head in a mock-shy gesture. Oh, please, I just do what I can. And who is this? Henderson asked, turning his gaze to me. His eyes narrowed slightly, as if he was trying to place a memory. That's Jane, Edward said quickly, his tone dropping. She's finding herself. She does a little freelance computer repair. Freelance, Laura added, rolling her eyes playfully. She's our little bohemian. We're still waiting for her to join the real world. Henderson stared at me. I held his gaze. I didn't shrink. I didn't look Own. Computer repair? Henderson asked, tilting his head. Funny, you look remarkably like the woman featured in the tech brief I read this morning. The CEO of that new cybersecurity vendor we just onboarded. Sentinel. The air left the immediate vicinity. Edward froze. Paige's smile faltered. Laura let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. Jane, Laura cackled, touching Henderson's arm as if he were a senile grandfather. Oh, Mr. Henderson, you're too kind. Jane couldn't run a lemonade stand, let alone a security firm. She gets anxiety ordering pizza. It must be a doppelganger, Edward said smoothly, stepping between us. Jane isn't involved in high-level business. She's very sensitive. The stress would kill her. Actually, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the chatter like a razor. Everyone froze. It was the first time I had spoken directly to a VIP in years. The implementation for your firm starts on Tuesday, Mr. Henderson, I said clearly. I'd recommend your CTO double-check the API integration protocols for the legacy servers. They tend to be buggy with the new encryption layer. We sent a memo about it, but it might have been overlooked. Silence, absolute, suffocating silence. Laura's mouth opened, then closed. Edward looked at me as if I had started speaking Aramaic. Henderson's eyebrows shot up. You know about the API issue? My CTO was screaming about that this morning. Yes, I said, taking a sip of champagne I had swiped from a passing tray. Because I wrote the patch for it. Jane, stop it, Paige hissed, gripping my arm hard enough to leave a bruise. Stop lying, you're embarrassing us. Mr. Henderson, she reads things online and gets confused. I'm sure that's it, Henderson said slowly, looking from my mother's claw-like grip to my calm face. He stepped back, looking unsettled. Well, Edward, we'll talk later. He walked away, looking back at me once over his shoulder. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Laura hissed, her face contorting into a mask of fury. "Why do you have to make up stories? You're sick, Jane, you're actually sick." "I didn't make up anything," I said. "Go to your table," Edward commanded, his face red. "Now, before I have security remove you." I turned and walked away. As I headed back to the kitchen exile, I saw Aunt Megan entering the ballroom. She was wearing a wide-brimmed hat and a suit that looked like it cost more than Edward's car. She caught my eye and winked. She patted her oversized purse. The seed was planted. Henderson was suspicious. The antagonist was rattled, but they were about to double down. Dinner was a blur of mediocre chicken and self-congratulatory toasts. I sat at table 19, ignoring the interns who were whispering about how terrifying my father looked. I kept my phone on the table, watching the group chat with my dev team. They were currently popping champagne in the office, celebrating the successful beta test. I should have been there. I should have been surrounded by people who respected me. Instead, I was watching my family prepare to publicly execute my character. The lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage. Edward walked up to the microphone, basking in the applause. "Thank you," he boomed. "Thank you all, 30 years, it's a long time." He went on for 20 minutes about loyalty, hard work, and legacy. He thanked his partners. He thanked Paige for keeping the home fires burning. And then he turned to Laura. "You know," Edward said, his voice getting thick with emotion, "a man works for his family. He builds a legacy not for himself, but for the next generation. And when I look at my daughter, Laura..." The spotlight swung to Laura, who dabbed at dry eyes with a napkin. "I see the future," Edward continued. "She has the drive, the spirit, and the integrity that I always hoped to instill. She is the shining star of the Miller name. Laura, come up here." Laura floated up to the stage. She took the mic. She looked beautiful, radiant, and completely toxic. "Oh, Daddy," she gushed, "you're making me cry." She laughed, a tinkling, practiced sound. "You know, growing up, my dad taught me that if you want something, you have to earn it. We didn't get handouts in this family." At table 19, I audibly choked on my water. The intern next to me patted my back. "We worked," Laura continued, her eyes scanning the room. "And that's why I'm so proud to buy my own way in this world. Unlike, well, we all have our crosses to bear." The room went quiet. She was going off script. She was looking for a target. She was looking for me. "My sister Jane is here tonight," Laura said, her voice taking on that sickly sweet pity tone. "Where are you, Janie?" Table 19. Heads turned. People squinted into the darkness of the back corner. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. "Jane has always been different," Laura sighed. "Struggling to find her path, struggling to hold down a job, and sometimes it's hard for me, you know, to succeed when she's flailing. But Dad, you taught me to be generous. That's why I'm so happy that we, as a family, could help her out again this month. We had to cover some bills, but hey, that's what family is for, right?" She was lying. She was projecting the theft of the bond onto me. She was claiming they paid my bills. "So, in honor of Dad," Laura said, raising her glass, "I'm announcing that I've used my bonus, my hard-earned bonus, to finally pay off the rest of Jane's student loans. Surprise, Jane, you're debt-free." The room erupted in applause. People were wiping tears. "What a saint," someone whispered near me. I sat there, frozen. My student loans? I had paid those off 5 years ago with my first dividend check. She was fabricating an entire reality where she was the savior and I was the charity case. It was a masterstroke of humiliation. If I denied it, I looked ungrateful. If I accepted it, I admitted to being a failure. Laura beamed on stage, soaking in the adoration. She had won. She had cemented the narrative. But she had made one fatal error. She had made it about money, and she had made it public. I stood up. I didn't mean to. It was a reflex. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. "Sit down," Paige mouthed from the head table, her eyes wide with panic. I didn't sit. I started walking. Not toward the exit, but toward the stage. The applause died down. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Laura's smile faltered. Jane, she said into the mic, her voice echoing. Jane, sit down, you're making a scene, you're drunk. I'm not drunk, I said. My voice wasn't amplified, but in the sudden silence of the ballroom, it carried. And I'm not debt-free because of you, Laura. I paid my loans off in 2019. Oh, stop it, Laura laughed nervously. She gets confused, everyone, it's the, you know, she tapped her temple. And the bond, I continued, walking closer. I was 10 feet from the stage now. The bond Grandma left me. You didn't use it to pay my bills. You used it to put a deposit on a Tesla. A white Model Y license plate pending. Security, Edward shouted, standing up. Get her out of here. Two burly men in blazers started moving toward me from the sides of the room. She's lying, Laura shrieked, losing her composure. She's a pathological liar. She's jealous because I'm successful and she's a nobody. She's a broke, sensitive little loser who fixes laptops for cash. Is she? The voice boomed from the back of the room. It was deep, raspy, and loud. Everyone turned. Aunt Megan was standing on a chair at table 8. She was holding up a large, glossy magazine. It wasn't just a newspaper clipping. She had brought the entire advance copy of Business Journal. Megan, Edward gasped, his face draining of color. What are you doing here? I'm here to read the news, Eddie, Megan shouted. And the news says your loser daughter just bought your firm. What? Edward whispered. Megan threw the magazine. It fluttered through the air and landed on a guest's table. The man picked it up. Read the headline, Megan commanded. The man, a competitor of my father's, adjusted his glasses. He looked at the cover. He looked at me. He looked at Laura. It says, the man read, his voice projecting into the stunned silence. The Silent Titan, how Jane Miller built Sentinel into a $20 million cybersecurity empire in secret. Laura dropped the microphone. It hit the stage with a deafening screech of feedback. I stopped walking. I looked at my father. I looked at my mother. I looked at my sister. I don't fix laptops, I said, my voice calm, steady, and cold as ice. I own the company that secures them, and as of Monday, I own the contract that keeps this family fed. The silence that followed the screech of the microphone was heavy, suffocating, and absolute. It was the kind of silence that sucks the air out of a room, leaving everyone suspended in a vacuum of pure shock. I watched the magazine travel from the hands of my father's competitor to the person next to him, then to another. A murmur started to ripple through the crowd, low at first, then rising like a tide. 20 million, someone whispered. That's her, another voice said, sounding awestruck. That's the girl in the picture, the one standing right there. On stage, Laura stood frozen. Her mouth was slightly open, her hands trembling at her sides. The spotlight, which she had demanded be trained solely on her, now felt like an interrogation lamp exposing every crack in her flawless foundation. Edward was the first to move. He stumbled off the stage, nearly tripping on the steps, and rushed toward the table where the magazine lay. He grabbed it with frantic, clumsy hands. I watched him stare at the cover. I saw his eyes scan the text, desperate to find the word satire or fiction. He looked up at me. His face was a mask of confusion and terror. Jane, he croaked. Sentin. That's a vendor, a major vendor. It is, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the gap between us. It's the vendor you just signed a 7-figure contract with on Thursday, Dad. You didn't read the signature line, did you? J.A. Miller. No, he whispered. No, that's impossible. You fix Wi-Fi. It's a lie, Laura screamed. The sound tore through the room, shrill and desperate. She stomped her foot, her composure shattering like cheap glass. She pointed a manicured finger at me. She printed that? Laura yelled, grabbing the microphone stand again, though the mic was on the floor. She shouted to the room without amplification, her voice straining. She went to a print shop and made a fake magazine. She's sick. She's always been jealous of me. Don't believe her. The crowd looked uncomfortable. People were shifting in their seats, exchanging glances. Laura looked unhinged. It's not a fake, Laura. Aunt Megan's voice boomed from the back. She walked forward now, parting the crowd like the Red Sea. I bought a subscription. It's online right now. Google it, people. Jane Miller Sentinel, go ahead. Hundreds of phones lit up simultaneously. The blue glow illuminated faces as guests began to scroll. "Oh my God," a woman near the front gasped. "It's true, Forbes did a piece on her last month too, the quiet disruptor." "She's listed as the sole founder," a man at table 4 said, showing his screen to his wife. "Net worth estimated at, wow." Laura looked around wildly. She saw the tide turning. She saw the admiration in the eyes of the guests, admiration that was directed at me, not her. The narrative she had spent 26 years building, the story of Laura the star and Jane the failure, was dissolving in real time. "Mom," Laura wailed, turning to Paige. "Do something, tell them she's lying." Paige was standing by the dessert table, her face pale. She looked at me, then at the magazine in Edward's hand, then at the guests whispering about my success. I saw the gears turning in her head. I saw the exact moment panic shifted into calculation. She plastered a smile on her face. It was a terrifying, rigid thing. She walked toward me, arms outstretched. "Oh, Jane," she cried out, her voice shaking with faux emotion. You surprise, is this what you were hiding? Oh, Edward, look, our girl, we knew she was working on something big, didn't we?" The audacity took my breath away. "We always told her to focus," Paige continued, addressing the crowd, trying to rewrite history in seconds. "We pushed her so hard because we knew she had this potential. That's why we were so tough on you, sweetie, to build your character." She reached out to hug me. I stepped back. The rejection was physical. Paige froze, her arms hanging in the empty air. "Don't," I said. "Jane, honey," she whispered, her eyes darting around to see if people were watching. "Don't be difficult, not now. This is a victory for the family." "There is no family in this victory," I said loud enough for Mr. Henderson to hear. "You didn't push me to build character. You pushed me away. You called me a failure 3 hours ago. You stole my grandmother's bond money to buy a car for the daughter you actually like." "That was a loan," Edward sputtered, stepping in to support his wife. "Jane, be reasonable. We're a team. Your success is our success. I'm the one who taught you about business." "You taught me nothing," I said, feeling a cold, hard anger crystallize in my chest. I reached into my clutch and pulled out the folded paper. The signature page. "You taught me that if I wanted to survive, I had to do it alone," I said. "You taught me that my value was 0 unless I was Laura. Well, look at the contract, Dad." I held it up. "This is the agreement you signed with Sentinel," I said. "Section 4, paragraph 2. The vendor reserves the right to terminate the contract immediately upon discovery of unethical conduct by the client's leadership." Edward went white. "Jane, you wouldn't. That contract is vital. We have a fiduciary responsibility to the board. We've already announced the partnership." "Then you have a problem," I said. "Because I don't do business with people who steal from me. And I certainly don't do business with people who use my name to humiliate me." "I didn't mean it," Laura shrieked, running down the stairs now, tripping on her gown. She grabbed my arm. Her grip was desperate, her nails digging in. "Jane, stop it. Mark is watching. You're ruining everything. Just say you were joking. Just say I helped you." I looked at Mark, her fiancé. He was standing near the stage, looking at Laura with a mixture of horror and realization. He looked at the woman who had just claimed to pay my bills, the woman who mocked me for being poor, and he saw the lie. "I can't help you, Laura," I said, pulling my arm from her grasp. "You're the marketing genius. Spin this." I turned to the crow. I apologize for the disruption. My aunt and I will be leaving now. Enjoy the cake. I hear it's expensive." "Jane, wait," Edward shouted. "We can talk about this. We can structure a deal, a family trust." "Jane," Paige cried, "you're being too sensitive." I stopped. I turned back one last time. "No, Mom," I said, smiling for the first time all night. "I'm not too sensitive, I'm too expensive." I walked out. Aunt Megan was right beside me, cackling so hard she was crying. As the double doors swung shut behind us, the last thing I heard was the chaotic roar of 100 conversations starting at once, and the sound of Laura sobbing into a dead microphone. The fallout was swift, brutal, and entirely of their own making. I didn't go home that night. I went to Aunt Megan's hotel suite. We ordered room service, burgers, fries, and a bottle of the most expensive champagne the hotel had, and we sat on the balcony, watching the city lights. We didn't talk much about the pain of the past, we talked about the future. For the first time in my life, I felt seen by a family member. By Monday morning, the Business Journal article was trending. The headline, "The Silent Titan," was everywhere in the tech circles. But in my hometown, the gossip wasn't about the money, it was about the party. Edward tried to come to my office at 9:00 a.m. on Monday. He didn't make it past the lobby. My receptionist, a fierce woman named Sarah who knew the whole story, simply told him, "Ms. Miller is in a meeting. She is not accepting unsolicited vendors." He sat in the lobby for 4 hours. I watched him on the security feed for a minute, a graying man in a suit that suddenly looked a little too big for him, holding a briefcase that contained nothing I wanted. Eventually, he left. Later that afternoon, I had legal send over the formal notice. I didn't cancel the contract with his firm. I wasn't going to punish his employees or his partners for his sins, and frankly, Sentinel needed the revenue to hit our Q4 targets. Business is business. But I added a rider to the agreement. All communication regarding this account must go through the Chief Technical Officer. No direct contact with the CEO is permitted. It was a professional restraining order. The personal fallout was messier. Laura's fiancé, Mark, called off the engagement 3 days later. Apparently, watching his future wife scream lies into a microphone and then try to physically attack her sister was a red flag he couldn't ignore. Plus, once the golden child veneer cracked, other truths came out. He found out about the credit card debt she was hiding, the fact that Paige was paying her rent, and the lies she had told him about her career. Without Mark, and without this successful narrative, Laura spiraled. She tried to blast me on social media, posting long, tearful videos about how I had blindsided the family and ruined her father's moment. It backfired. The internet is a cruel place, but it's also good at digging up receipts. People found the article. They found her old posts mocking freelancers. The comments section turned into a roast of epic proportions. She deleted her accounts within 48 hours. 2 weeks after the party, I received a letter. It was a cashier's check for $5,000 plus interest. There was a note from Paige. "Jane, we are returning the bond money. We hope this clears up the misunderstanding. We would like to invite you to dinner this Sunday. Just us. No photographers. We want to get to know the real you. We are very proud. Love, Mom." I stared at the check. 5 years ago, that money would have saved me from hunger. 5 years ago, that note would have made me weep with gratitude. I would have run back to them, desperate to finally be proudly accepted. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I wasn't the backup plan. I took the check. I endorsed it. And I donated it to a scholarship fund for underprivileged girls entering STEM fields. I didn't reply to the note. I didn't go to dinner. I realized that they didn't want to know the real me. They wanted to know the CEO. They wanted access to the power I now held. If I went back, nothing would change. They would just find new ways to use me, new ways to minimize me to make themselves feel bigger. Only now they would do it with a smile while asking for loans. I chose peace instead. I kept in touch with Aunt Megan. In fact, I hired her as a consultant for our Chicago expansion. She was brilliant, sharp, and terrifying, exactly what we needed. 6 months later, I was walking into a gala. This time, it was my gala. Sentinel was celebrating the IPO. I was wearing a dress I chose, surrounded by people I respected, standing on a stage I had built with my own 2 hands. I looked out at the crowd. I saw my team. I saw Aunt Megan raising a glass in the front row. I saw the future I had fought for. I thought about table 19. I thought about the years of being told I was too sensitive. V. I smiled. They were right. I was sensitive. I was sensitive enough to notice the details they missed. I was sensitive enough to build a system that detected threats before they struck. I was sensitive enough to know when I was being lied to. My sensitivity wasn't a weakness. It was the code that rewrote my life. And as the applause washed over me, real and earned, I knew one thing for sure. The backup plan had officially taken the lead.